All right. It's good to see all of you tonight. I went ahead and just put on the screen up here a map of the area that we're talking about so that we get maybe a little bit better understanding of where Abraham has come from and where he winds up. I believe this is an interactive map. It's on a Bible program that I have, which shows you the journey that he went on as he traveled way on up around that Fertile Crescent right there and then comes back down into Canaan right there. Then eventually he will go down into Egypt and then he'll come back up to Bethel uh, as we look at that map. But this is the area you can see. Babylon is right here, the Red Sea down here. And so Ur of the Chaldean region near the Euphrates River, the Tigris River that we read about in the book of Genesis, chapter 1 and 2. But so we're going to have a lot of history taking place in some of this area over here. Obviously, the Bible, as it centers in on some of that. But I just thought that I would mention to give us a view of that and just leave that up there. And we were in Genesis chapter 12, and you have a record of where God had called Abraham. And from what city or from what area did he call him? What city? You are. Spelled U-R. As we say, of the Chaldees. Was it a well-developed city, or was it still really backwards? It's very well developed for that day especially. And so Abraham has come from that, and God promised him three things that we noted. Him leaving Ur of the Chaldees, there's three promises in that Abrahamic promise. What were the three things that he promised? Okay, a great nation. All right, the seed promise.
Bless them that bless thee.
That is correct. And a land promise. Land promise. Okay, God has told him to get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, curse him that curseth thee. Then he says, and in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And so we'll follow that promise now throughout the rest of the Bible. Keep in mind, this promise was given long before the law of Moses even. Okay? So it's still early in time. And so as he travels up, and you will remember that he went up into Haran, and you can see Haran up here at the very top, and there his father, Terah, died. What do we know about Terah other than he went to Haran and died? Right. He, according to, I think it's Joshua, 24:2, that he served other gods. And so you have to appreciate the fact Abraham did not. Abraham did not serve other gods. He served the one true God. And God has a purpose then for Abraham. And when he leaves Haran and comes on down into the land of Canaan, who's going to go with him other than Sarah? Lot, his nephew. Lot, his nephew. How old was he when he left Haran? 75 years of age. 75 years of age. You could ask Brother Ira Rice how old someone was, and he'd say, oh, he's about our age. He might have been 80 and we 40 when he would say that, so you'd have to take that with a grain of salt. But he was about 75. That's right. Yeah. As far as I know, we're not. But this is quite a journey. Traveling. And we're going to learn that Abraham not only has these, but he has servants ultimately. And so much so that he will even have about 200 soldiers a little bit later on when Lot is captured and he goes and reclaims Lot and the others that were taken by the people of Sodom. Well, not, was it Sodom? Anyway, the others. But anyway, he travels on down, and we come now, verse 5, 12:5. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and the souls that they had gotten in Haran, so people, and they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. So the land of Canaan is going to be in this particular area right in here. We could blow that map up and all the various cities. Over to the west will be Philistines. And of course the Great Sea, also known as the Mediterranean Sea. Here we have Egypt, and Abraham is going to travel into Egypt as we're about to see. But he comes into Shechem. I don't know that it is actually on this particular map. To the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanite was then in the land. So it's inhabited, but you remember God is saying, I'm going to give it to you. So again, faith it takes to go here and realize ultimately his seed would prosper. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, or unto Jehovah, who appeared unto him. And maybe like a vision that he has in some way. Now, no one has seen God at any time, so it had to be some form of a manifestation. But God assures him that he's going to give him this land, and Abraham then is going to worship him. Someone has said you could follow Abraham's journey by the smoke off of his altars. Because wherever he went, he worshiped. He didn't take the philosophy, well, I'm not at home, so I don't have to go to worship, right? Wherever he went, he worshiped. And so it is then great thing for us that when we're traveling, that we still worship God. Well, he removed from thence, verse 8, and unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west, and Hai on the east, and there he built an altar unto the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. So again, as he traveled, he builds an altar. Now, Moses is writing this, and he's writing history. Bethel was not, at the time that Abraham went there, was not known as Bethel. Let's go to Genesis 28 for a moment. Genesis chapter 28. And you'll recall when Jacob is having to flee for his life, because Esau's wanting to kill him, right? And he goes to sleep at night, and he has a vision, doesn't he? And there's a vision of these angels coming, ascending and descending upon a ladder. And Jacob, verse 16, awakes out of his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, how dreadful or how awesome is this place? This is none other but what? The house of God, which is the gate of heaven. Now that's significant. The house of God is the gate of heaven. If you think about it, in the tabernacle, you had two basic compartments. And what were they? And the first compartment was called what? The holy place. What was behind the veil? What was that place called? The most holy place. In type and antitype, what does the holy place represent? The church. And the most holy place? Heaven. In order to get into the most holy place, then what did you have to go through? The holy place, which is the church, right? And it's significant that it's in the church then that we're reconciled unto God. And when Jesus Christ comes again, what is he going to take into heaven? But the church. He's going to present it to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing. And so I want to be in the church, right? And so you can't get into the most holy place without going through the holy place, right? And so we have that first principle stated, though, right here. This is the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. I think and so there's complete unity in the Word of God, and I just find that amazing. But now then, if you'll notice, so verse 18, I'm still in Genesis 28. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows, and he set it up as a pillar, and poured oil upon the top of it, and he called the name of that place what? Bethel. Beth-el. When you see E-L endings in the Old Testament, a lot of times that refers something about God. It's E-L. Is an abbreviation for God. Like Bethel is house of God. And, I'm sorry? Samuel, ask of God. I wouldn't think so, because they're not Hebrews, so the EL would not really mean anything in English in them as such. But it is interesting, and a lot of them, that all of them last name will be Patel. P-A-T-E-L. I had not thought about that, but that's interesting. But that has to do, I think, more with their culture. But the name of the city was called what at the first? In verse 19. It was Luz. So it was known originally as Luz. Now, there are two places called Luz, but this one is down a little bit south, just like there were two Bethlehems. But so what we're looking at actually is what the Bible, well, not the Bible, I'm sorry. I quote the Bible so much, everything I say the Bible says, when it's not the Bible that said it. But it's in hermeneutics, it's prolepsis. It's a figure of speech known as prolepsis. We use it when we say, well, you know, when I married my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife when I married her. She wasn't, I dated my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife when we dated, per se. Or when President, who's our president? Trump. When President Trump was a little boy. Well, when he was a little boy, he wasn't president. So that's prolepsis. So we have prolepsis, something that's named up and ahead of the time as such. All right? But you don't have to know that to go to heaven. That just makes interesting living here, though. And so we have then that he goes to Bethel. That's going to be a significant place as far as worship to God is concerned. You know, when they, just off the top of my head, when they came out of when they were going to set up the tabernacle, and they moved it back before it was set up in Jerusalem. I think it was in Shiloh, maybe Bethel for a while, but anyway, Shiloh. All right. But anyway, and Abraham journeyed going on toward the south. So here he is, let's just say at Bethel, and he continues to come on down into the southern part then of the land of Canaan. And it came to pass when he was come near to enter into Egypt. So he's come on down, almost about to Memphis. Did y'all know Memphis? Yeah. Elvis not the only one ever lived close to Memphis, evidently. All right. That he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. We gain from this that she was physically a beautiful lady, evidently. But also we learn from the Word of God that she was a beautiful lady spiritually as well. And so it's not her physical beauty necessarily that was the most important, but rather her spiritual beauty that she had, and which also shows, by the way, that you can be both a beautiful person and a child of God. Right? In 1 Peter chapter 3, we learn this about Sarah. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they may without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. Here's a person who hasn't obeyed the gospel, husband has not, but if the wife would conduct herself in such a way that is godly, the husband hopefully will learn to appreciate that and want to be converted to the Lord ultimately. While they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear or respect, whose adorning, beautifying, let it not be the outward adorning of the plaiting of the hair, or the wearing of gold, or the putting on of apparel. Is he saying that it's wrong to curl your hair or to plait your hair or to wear gold? No, he's not saying that, because if you do, what's the next one say? The putting on of apparel. Obviously, it's not wrong to put on of apparel, but that's not the way. You don't dress in such a way as to incite illicit desire from others. And so, interestingly, a lot of times when the Bible discusses modesty, it's not because they're wearing too little, it was because they were wearing too much. That is, that they drew attention. I'm not saying you ought to be immodest the other way either. But I'm just saying that it was the way that they would dress, the plaiting of their hair, which would call attention to them as to be maybe a woman who's available, we'll say. Or the wearing of the gold excessively to the point you're calling attention to the fleshly side of life rather than dressing modestly. You can go to extremes on either side, could you not? But he says, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, and that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of God of great price. A woman then who is conducting herself in subjection to her husband, dressing modestly, living her life in a quietness, subjective, if you will, way, is of a great price to the Lord. For after this manner in the old time, the holy women also, who trusted in God, adorned or beautified themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands. Then he mentions verse 6, even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are, as long as you do well and are not afraid with any amazement. Then he gives instruction to the husbands. So he gave instructions to the wives, but he mentioned Sarah as a godly example. So we learn from Genesis that evidently she was physically an attractive lady. But also we learn that she was also a very spiritually attractive lady, attractive to God. And she conducted herself in a way that was indeed a godly fashion. So I think there's a great lesson for us here today. I think I've seen on the extremes, obviously, both sides, right? There are some who maybe run so far from not wearing enough to the point that they're actually calling attention to themselves on the other side. And then there are some who run from that to go over to this. So extremism is wrong. I guess I could quote Brother Roy Hearn. He's not alive today, so you can't do anything to him if you disagree with him. But he said he was asked one time by a person, is it wrong for a woman to wear lipstick? Now, you're walking dangerous grounds when you're asked those type of questions. That aren't you? The preacher is on how he answers. But he said he never thought it was wrong for an old barn to have a fresh coat of paint on it. Is the way he answered it. And so he said it, not I. All right? I didn't say it. But here's what he says to Sarah. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. here you find a fault with Abraham. He is running ahead of God. Sometimes we can make plans and don't include God in our plans, right? And we get into trouble. Running ahead of God. He should have inquired of God. Lord, what would you have me to do? I am afraid that because of my wife, they will kill me in order to have my wife. Evidently he didn't do that because he doesn't follow that. And it came to pass when Abram was come into Egypt that the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair. Okay, so they note that she's a beautiful lady. The princes also of Pharaoh saw her and commended her before Pharaoh. They want to have the favor of Pharaoh, and their job evidently is, because Pharaoh would have a harem. Not necessarily just one wife, which it should be, but he would have a harem, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Okay, this is how far it had gone. Before a woman would ever be presented to the king, to a Pharaoh, there would be a period of time where they'd make sure that she was well fitted for Pharaoh. Sometimes there was ceremonial cleansings and a lot of things that they would have to go through before these servants would present her unto Pharaoh. Well, but Pharaoh knows that, okay, she's the one who may be presented unto me, and he entreated Abraham well for her sake, and he had sheep and oxen, and he asses or donkeys, and men servants and maid servants, and she asses or she donkeys, and camels. All of these things are very important, obviously. A lot of stock. But the Lord intervenes. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abraham's wife. So the Lord intervenes. Any idea as to why the Lord would intervene on this? That's right. That's right. And something is going to happen between Abraham and Sarah, that she's going to bear a son, and it's going to be Abraham's son. Now, Abraham several times runs ahead of God. And Sarah runs ahead of God later on when she offers Abraham Hagar. Okay? And so we've got to learn from this. We go on God's time and we trust in God. We're not told what this plague was, but it was significant enough that Pharaoh says, I better get rid of this. I better get out of this situation, that he learns that God is against him. Now, Pharaoh would be polytheistic, right? Meaning many gods. That doesn't mean he doesn't believe in Jehovah God. He's just one of the many, though, perhaps to him. So he's not necessarily an unbeliever that God exists, but he realizes that Jehovah has plagued him. So Pharaoh called Abram, and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why sayest thou, She is my sister? So I might have taken her to be my wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her and go thy way. I learned from this that even the heathen knew it was wrong to take someone else's wife. They could and did oftentimes, but now then he's saying, you deceived me. You led me to believe that she is thy sister. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had. It must be the case also, what could Pharaoh have done to Abraham or to Abram? Maybe God let him know, you mess with him, you're messing with the apple of my eye. And so Pharaoh although he reproves Abraham, he doesn't do anything to him, and he gives him all these wonderful blessings. So he's still seeking the favor of Abraham's God too then. And so the plague evidently would be removed. We keep in mind that Pharaoh is not necessarily the name of the man, but rather a line of kings. So there'll be different pharaohs as we go through. And so we have something interesting now. So he's gone down into Egypt because of a famine, which is not uncommon in that part of the world. And so he goes down into Egypt, and then he's going to, now where in Egypt? He doesn't say. I think the map has got an idea that just barely into Egypt. Matter of fact, do you recall somebody else having to go into Egypt to fear because somebody was trying to kill their child? Jesus. He had to go down into Egypt. I'm sorry? Okay. Zoan? Mm-hmm. That will come into play again, I believe, at the, well, I may be thinking of something else. I'll have to wait till I get there so I don't have to back up on it. And Abraham went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him into the south. Looks like Lot was down there well in Egypt then, right? Although the Bible, I don't guess, says that he took Lot down into Egypt. Maybe it did, but we learn he brought him out. And Abraham was very rich in cattle. And not only that, but in silver and in gold. I learned another lesson here. It's not sinful to be rich. In fact, it's not sinful to be very rich. Abraham was very rich, but he was a godly man. He possessed his possessions rather than his possessions possessing him. All right? So some people think that, I know a preacher friend of mine that said he was in a business meeting one time and a man said, well, when you became a preacher, and he said he was serious, you took a vow of poverty, right? He said, well, no, I didn't take a vow. But the joke has always been on the preachers that the Lord will keep him faithful and the brethren keep him poor, right? And so a vow of poverty. It's not sinful to be rich, as long as it's not, as Jay Brown used to say, ill-gotten gain. It's not gotten in a wrong way. But at the same time, it says, charge them that are rich in this world, that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God who giveth them richly all things to enjoy. That they be rich in good works, willing to communicate, ready to distribute. And so they can use those things in God's service and still be pleasing, of course, to God. So he went on in his journeys from the south, even to where? Back up to Bethel, unto the place where he had been, where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai. So on other maps, you can find Bethel and Ai, and you can see, okay, this is where Abraham went. I think it would be really interesting today even to travel that part of the world when they're not shooting firecrackers at one another over there, to travel into that part of the world and visit some of those places. And there are a lot of good brethren who, I guess, take journeys into some of those places. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Notice he says, I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. Lot is being blessed because of his association to Abraham. You know, the world, I think, is blessed because of righteous people. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. I think that's probably Proverbs 14:34. Righteousness exalts a nation. And if we want our nation to be exalted, we ought to be practicing righteousness, which is just right doing. And what a blessing it is. And you think about the influence, although it's not true religious, not truly biblical, but you think about all of the things that happen in the world because of religious people. What are the hospitals in our areas? A lot of them. Because of people under Christian influence, at least, under biblical influence. I don't see any hospitals built by the nation for atheism, things of that nature. In other words, if you follow God's principles, you're usually compassionate people. And I think what a blessing St. Jude Hospital is to a lot of people. They go there and it doesn't cost them anything and all of those. But again, notice St. Jude, although Jude, as we know in the Bible, had nothing to do with that hospital. Danny Thomas did, though. And the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so they could not dwell together. They have so much substance that they cannot live together. And what happens because of their closeness here? That's right. The servants began to fight. Well, this is our well, you can probably think. My cattle needs to be here. Here's my cattle needs to feed here. So, and there was a strife then between the herdsmen of Abraham's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And it mentions again, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. I'm not sure why that is mentioned again, other than it could be two things here. One is they're vying for territory, and there are other people also there. But another thing is you've got God's people feuding, and there are unbelievers there who could see that. But keep in mind that God wanted Abraham anyway to be separated from his family, did he not? So this is another way that is going to happen. Because they've gotten so wealthy, they can't have all their herdsmen there together. And I find it very encouraging that Abraham steps in to settle the dispute. Not Lot here. Abraham does. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen. Why? For we be brethren. And you think about that in the church today. We ought not to have a lot of strife going back and forth. Why? We're brethren. We have the same Father. We have the same family. And so it is then we ought to be working together. In matters of judgment, this is what this is here, a matter of judgment. Now here's what he says, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take to the left hand, what will I do? I'll go to the right. Or if you depart to the right hand, I'll go to the left. Now, isn't that a magnanimous spirit, a great spirit that Abraham had, attitude that he had? You know what he could have said? Number one, I'm your uncle. You ought to respect me because you're the nephew. I am the uncle. Secondly, God didn't call you. He called me. Therefore, I'm going to take what land I want, and you're going to have to be satisfied with what I don't take. That's what he could have done. But he didn't do that. God is going to give me the land that God wants me to have, but he allows Lot to make that choice, doesn't he? And so you have to appreciate that about Abraham. We don't always have to have our way in matters of judgment. Now, in matters of faith, we've got to stand strong as horseradish. In other words, what God has said, we cannot compromise. But in matters of judgment, not everybody's always going to agree with the decision that elders make in matters of judgment, right? Some people might want to start services at 9:30, somebody else might at 10. Matters of judgment. And, well, somebody's got to make a decision, though, right? And sometimes divisions happen in churches not because of anything doctrinally, but because of attitudes along that. All right? Well, and Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, and it was well watered everywhere. This is before the Lord then destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like unto the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. That's what I was thinking of, the Zoar earlier. So prior to this then, in Sodom and Gomorrah, I said the Red Sea. Red Sea's over here. Lot goes down. I started to push that map up. I can't do that. And I can't pull the building down, so I guess I have to leave it right there. It's interesting that it is thought that probably Sodom and Gomorrah might have been toward the bottom of the Red Sea. That's maybe some conjecture. But we see a lot happening at this point in time. But this was well watered at that point in time. But God is going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to learn, as we'll pick back up next Wednesday evening, that Sodom was a very wicked place. Homosexuality, another name for it, is sodomy. It comes from this very word here, the people who live there. And so we'll learn also in 2 Peter Lot's attitude about the people, about the situation that is there. Maybe before we move somewhere, we ought to do some inquiring of things spiritually to see, okay, is this a righteous place? Is this a good place to raise my family? And so on. But anyway, that's our class for this evening, and appreciate your thoughts and your patience with me.